Hey YouTube. You ever open a deck of cards that you maybe left out overnight and it has this click? I hate that. It's one of the things that makes me think that this deck is dead to me, but the truth is that it's only temporary. The reason that happens is because of a difference in the humidity level between when the cards were manufactured and where they are now. When they make these things, they actually take humidity into account, and there's a certain level of tolerance, either more humid or more dry, that these things can tolerate without bending. But if you ever take them beyond those points, it causes the cards to warp, either up or down. Now, that click doesn't mean that the cards are ruined. It just means that you need to get them back into that tolerance range that we were talking about earlier. And if you can do that, eventually the cards return back to flat. But if you live in a place that's perpetually humid, like the South, or it's always dry, like the high desert, this is going to be a problem. And card clips won't solve your issue either, because all they do is press on the cards, but pressure isn't your problem, humidity level is. You could press them all day long, but the second you take them out, if they're still in the environment that caused the warp will just return. Your better bet is to try to get something like this where it wraps around the box itself and tries to protect from all of the environmental influences, from dropping to also the change in temperature and moisture. But even this won't stop that warp if you leave the deck around long enough. Now, I'm a big believer that if you can't solve this problem, you either gotta drop it or use it. So assuming that you don't wanna just throw away your cards every time that they warp, best you learn to use the fact that they change shape with moisture and temperature to your advantage. Let me give you an example. Remember the last time you were holding a deck while watching a Magic tutorial? And you notice that the bottom card starts to bow toward your hand if you're not doing anything with the deck. It's not happening because you're squeezing the deck, it's happening because that bottom card is absorbing the heat and the moisture from your hands. The same thing might happen if you were performing with a deck while you were really nervous. If your palms were sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, you might notice that that card starts to bend. But if you ever took it out and just let it sit there, eventually the moisture evaporates and it returns to the shape dictated by the humidity level in the room. But while it's there, why not use it? Because that sounds an awful lot like a crimp. The idea of a crimp is pretty old. Older than we probably have documentation for, but you can imagine it's probably been around for as long as playing cards have been around and used to play for money. Suffice it to say, a crimp is just a feature of a card that allows you to not only track it, but find it again through various means and circumstances while the deck is moving around and being shuffled. You might actually be guilty of this. If you've ever played Uno and you noticed that the wild card had a slight bend to it, and now you know where to find it when you're shuffling those cards, congratulations, you are now guilty of advantage play. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I do want to give you enough that you could utilize what's happening when these cards are getting bowed. So you've had the deck in your hand for a while, and either because of boredom or nervousness, that bottom card is starting to bow because of the moisture and the heat. This is to your advantage, because if you were to take that card and cut it into the middle of the deck, there are no breaks. There's nothing to see. But if you were to do a Charlier cut, right, a one-handed cut, it is more likely to drop at that card than any other card. Look familiar? Usually when you're talking about a crimp, it's not the card that's crimped that you care about, but more the cards that surround it. Because as much fun as it is cutting to the card that's been sweaty against my palm this entire time, finding someone else's card is a lot more useful. If someone were to pick a card, Ace of Spades, that's useful, and I cut it into the deck, that ace is very much lost. But all I'd have to do is relax my grip, let the cards fall, and as long as my card is on bottom, their card is on top. This falls well and truly into the category of impromptu gaff work. It's the idea that you're changing the form and the function of cards while you're holding them so that you can use them to your advantage. Now, this is temporary, right? Eventually, this card, as it equalizes with the rest of the air in the room, will bow back. It will straighten out. In fact, as it gets cut into the deck, if you just let the deck relax, you will eventually lose it. But that doesn't mean you can't use it while you've got it. Now, even though I didn't get to go over crimp work or the idea of crimps very far in this video, there are a couple of resources that I want you to know about in case you want to explore the idea further. The first one is Expert Card Technique. We've already gone over it. Hugard and Browy wrote an amazing work, but there's actually an entire chapter on crimps in that book. The second resource is Jason England's Foundation series, when he talks about the dead cut. That download was one of the most useful I've ever come across, and the man is a walking bibliography, and he pays service to that at the very end of the download by giving you countless resources to keep hunting for more ideas with this concept. So, the next time you come across a deck of cards that has something weird going for it, either the cards are bowing as you hold them or they have a click in the deck or something weird like that, instead of chucking the cards and opening a brand new pack, why don't you see if you can use the weirdness to your advantage? So many of the ideas that I and my friends have come across over the years were not these eureka moments where someone thought of something and then created it from scratch. They were observations of oddities that were happening as we were all handling cards, and then we just kept chasing these ideas until we had something fruitful. I hope that you guys do the exact same thing. In the meantime, I'll see you guys soon.